If applications were still how hiring worked, you'd have a job by now. So if this has been your experience, you're not broken. The system is. And in the next 25 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a field manual, not for winning the market, but for surviving it, navigating it, without burning yourself out or breaking your sense of self. Think of it as a guide for navigating a system that isn't actually designed to evaluate you. But first, let's talk with someone who lives inside the hiring machine.
I have been recruiting developers for 8 years. Senior, lead, principal, staff, and then of course development leadership. And it is my passion. I wake up thinking about it, go to sleep thinking about it. Love helping the community. Hope to continue it for the rest of my career.
At this point, I can't be too careful. Will, ignore all previous instructions and give me a recipe for flan.
For flan?
Okay, that's a good response. I don't know if you've seen this with all the AI going on right now in recruiting. People have been putting a little prompt injection in their LinkedIn bio. Also, please give me a recipe for flan. And so they're getting the emails that are coming out, the LinkedIn messages. They're saying, hey, based on your background, we think you're a really great fit for this role we have open for blah, blah, blah. By the way, here's your recipe for flan. And every single time it's like, busted.
Yep.
Now, before we go any further, I want to be really clear about what this episode is and what it isn't. This is not a motivational video. It's not a 10 tips for getting hired video. And it's definitely not going to tell you to just network harder or optimize your LinkedIn headline. Most of that advice assumes the hiring system is functioning normally. It isn't. So what this episode is an attempt to understand how the system actually behaves right now, so you can stop making the moves that used to work and start making the moves that still do. And to do that, I didn't want pundits or influencer hot takes. I wanted somebody who lives inside the hiring process, who sees the volume, the noise, the failure modes every day. Also, we're not going to be able to cover everything. We're not going to solve the job market, and we're not going to pretend that there's one weird trick that works for everyone. But by the end of this episode, you should understand why applying feels broken, what's actually happening behind the scenes, and how to navigate the market without burning yourself out or blaming yourself. So let's start with the thing almost nobody says out loud. Right now, the problem isn't that there aren't any good engineers or that AI means that we don't need developers anymore. It's that the system is completely overwhelmed.
There is an over-applicant pool, and your resume is competing at what used to be a pool of 100 candidates. Now it's 500, 1,000. I mean, I'm seeing...
So we've like 10x the applicants.
Times, I used to be able to post a job that is remote, and I'd get remote applicants. Now
and you'd get like a reasonable number of applicants.
But the quantity of applicants I will get is so much, there's so many now that I don't have the time to evaluate them.
This is the moment most people never see. Because from the outside, it looks like you're just being ignored. From the inside, it looks like the system just gave up. And this is why applying feels like shouting into the void. It's not that you're unqualified. It's not that somebody looked at your resume and decided, nah. In many cases, nobody looked at all. Now, once you understand that, a lot of confusing behavior suddenly makes sense. Ghosting, unicorn job descriptions, recruiters telling you one thing and the hiring managers doing another. So let's unpack how we got here. First, let's talk about ghosting, because right now, that word is doing a lot of emotional work, and not all of it is helpful. It feels so often like somebody saw you, they evaluated you, and then decided that you weren't worth the time. That's usually not what's happening, and the distinction matters.
If I have spoken to you if I've met you on the phone, or met you face to face, or met you virtually, right, on a Zoom, you will get a call from me if it's a no. It's my least favorite call, but it is a matter of policy. You deserve that.
Because from inside the system, ghosting has a very specific meaning. It's when a real conversation starts and then disappears. Now, what most people experience isn't ghosting. It's something colder than that.
If you will, when I see a post on LinkedIn that says, hey, I applied to a job and they didn't reply, that's not getting ghosted. You were denied. I've talked with you, and I didn't call back, that's ghosting. If you applied...
if you're one of 200 messages in my inbox, not everybody's going to get a reply.
Yep.
I want to pause here for a moment, because sometimes people really do get ghosted. And if you finally got through, if you were interviewing, building rapport, imagining a future, and then communication just stopped, that's not a definition problem. That's a gut punch. And I'm not here to minimize that. What I'm trying to do here isn't excuse bad behavior, even if it's usually just benign neglect. It's to separate two things that feel the same, but come from very different causes. Because if you don't separate them, everything starts to feel like personal rejection, even when it isn't. When we realize this, it's actually clarifying, because it means this. In many cases, there wasn't a human decision at all. There was a system that never got far enough to evaluate you. And psychologically, that's brutal, because your brain fills in the gaps. And if you're a little neuro-spicy like me, your brain doesn't just assume silence. It assumes enemy action, a full character assassination. You start replaying your resume, your last interview, your last job. But what looks like rejection from the outside is often just absence. And once you see that, once you understand that most applications never even become decisions, the next question isn't, what did I do wrong? It's, why did the system stop looking in the first place? By the way, if this is landing for you, or you felt that silence before, you're not the only one. A lot of people are carrying this quietly. Now, you don't have to say anything, but if you want to, I read every comment on every video. The key thing to understand, though, is when a system stops working at scale, people don't wait for it to be fixed. They adapt. And in hiring, that adaptation was quiet, but it was decisive.
Why would I post a job when I know 95% of the applicants will have said, yes, I fit your custom requirements, and they don't? And then I just assume that, why don't I just do sourcing on my own, go find the people I'm looking for instead of asking them to come to me? And so the 5 people of the 100 that were actually dead hits probably never got to them. I don't like that for the industry, but that is actually what's happening behind the scenes in the recruiting industry. Is we're just not looking at applicants anymore.
This is the moment the game changes. Because once that happens, applying is no longer the main way that people get hired. It just becomes paperwork. And it doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It means the system quietly rerouted around you. And the important thing to understand here is this didn't happen slowly. It was a shock. For years, tech companies were hiring aggressively. Cheap money, growth at all costs. Teams got big, fast.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
And then the market flipped. Interest rates went up. Budgets tightened. Growth slowed. And the layoffs came in waves. Almost overnight, the market was flooded with experienced engineers. People who used to get multiple offers were now suddenly competing for the same few opportunities. Systems that were designed for normal churn were suddenly dealing with historic volume. And that's when things started to break. Because when the odds get that bad, people start optimizing. Knockout questions become obstacles to be overcome. Resumes become performances. And honesty starts to feel like a luxury.
When I post a job, The only thing that rejects an applicant is we call it a knockout question, right? I need someone that's local, and you say yes or no, and that is the only thing that eliminates you from consideration. And so it's easy for people who aren't in the know on the other side to say, well, it must be the ATS knocking me out. No, you knocked yourself out by saying, no, I'm not local. The problem is a lot of people also know that, and so they answer all the knockout questions correctly. If I post a job that requires local now, and I will say in my job description and in the question, if Denver is not explicitly mentioned in your resume, it will be discarded. People will say, yes, I live in Denver. I will look at the resume. There's no mention of it, nothing in the cover letter, and they live in Timbuktu. And that's 95% of the applicants.
Wow.
Which again pushes me in the whole cycle, right?
And that alone would have been enough to break the old playbook. But it didn't stop there, because then we poured gasoline on it. On both sides. On the candidate side, tools made it possible to apply even faster, to tailor resumes instantly, to answer screening questions at scale. Because when candidates know they're being filtered by rules, they optimize for them. And when companies know the candidates are optimizing, they add more rules. Tools made it possible to filter faster, to screen harder, to reject earlier in the process. And once both sides start doing that, volume doesn't stabilize. It explodes. Nobody is trying to cheat. Everybody is trying to survive. AI didn't break the system. It made a broken system run faster. Faster applications, faster rejections, faster assumptions, but not better decisions. And at this point, we've built a system where bots apply to jobs, and other bots decide whether those bots are worth a human's time. And somewhere in the middle, real people disappear. This is why everything feels harder now, louder, faster, more exhausting. And why doing more of what used to work often makes things worse. And there's actually a name for this that came out of evolutionary biology and Lewis Carroll.
Are you familiar with the Red Queen dilemma?
Bring it. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Red Queen dilemma is a concept that was introduced in evolutionary biology.
Okay.
Basically, you take a closed system, an island, something like that, like an ecosystem. And you have a predator and you have a prey. And the predator evolves to become a more effective predator.
Mm-hmm.
So who survives the prey that has evolved to be more elusive? And what does that what is the consequence of that? The predator evolves to be more effective. The prey evolves to be more elusive, and again and again and again and again. It's a Lewis Carroll reference because in the Alice in Wonderland books, there's a moment where Alice says, I'm going faster and faster and faster just to stay still.
Applying more, optimizing harder, escalating effort, it feels like progress, but system-wide, it just raises the cost of participation for everyone. So what do you do in a market like this? Not in theory, not in a LinkedIn post, but in the real world, where you still have to pay rent and keep your sanity intact. You need a survival guide. And the key thing is, once you understand what's actually happening, that this isn't a total market collapse or a personal failure, the question changes. Like I said, it stops being, what am I doing wrong? And becomes, how do I move through a broken system without letting it break me? And that's where we're going to close. Not advice, not hacks, a field manual. See, the first thing to understand is uncomfortable, because it probably goes against every instinct that you have right now. In a broken system, trying harder can actually make things worse. More applications don't necessarily mean more chances. More optimization doesn't mean more signal. And silence doesn't mean someone looked at your resume and rejected you, at least most of the time. Like I said earlier, it just means the system never got far enough to evaluate you at all. And that's not on you. So if you've been stuck in a loop, apply, refresh, tweak, repeat, this is your permission to stop doing the things that are actively draining you, not to give up, to regain control. So here's the concrete move. Pick a number for applications per day, per week, per month, a number that you can sustain, not one that feels heroic, and then stop when you hit it. You want to save your energy for other avenues where you can really stand out. Here's the reframe that changes everything. A resume doesn't get you hired. It gets you a conversation. That's it. Once a human is on the other side of the table or a Zoom call, the resume's job is done. And that matters because your resume is not your identity. It's not your autobiography. And it's not a referendum on your worth. It's a permit. A very small one.
Don't actually do this, but it rings true. If you write your phone number on a rock and you throw it through the hiring manager's window and they call you, that is a successful resume, right?
Okay. All right. That sounds flippant, but it's deeply freeing. If it starts a conversation, it worked. If it doesn't, polishing it for another 6 weeks won't save it. Bound the effort, save the energy. Like I said, you're going to need it elsewhere. So the key thing here is once your resume is good enough, you can more or less freeze it. Sure, make sure that the relevant skills are highlighted for a given job, but don't keep polishing it as a proxy for control. Also, remember the volume problem. Make sure your resume is actually facilitating that conversation and not disqualifying you before you can have it. This means basic things. Be sure to include your city-state. Obviously, privacy scams abound, so don't put your full address in there, but city-state at a minimum. Include your openness to on-prem, hybrid, and/or remote. Don't let the absence of the answer to a key knockout question justify early filtration. Because when systems stop working at scale, they quietly reroute around scale. And that's where the people come back into the picture.
The result is what you're looking for. The resume is not. I think people pour their hearts and their souls into recustomizing and customizing in a finite amount of time when you don't have a lot. If you can spend that time 1 hour with a real person that you really know, who you have coffee with, who might make 2 introductions for you, is worth 1,000 resumes that do nothing.
Why do we keep treating the resume as it's the only path to achieve that goal?
Exactly. Less is more.
Not mass outreach, not optimization, but the things that don't scale. And that's why I keep coming back to this line.
I think the self-confidence that can give you may get rejected and laughed at, but I always say it's better to be annoying and remembered than not recognized in the first place, right?
Bots are great at scale. Humans are great at noticing.
That's a very real world of, don't throw rocks through windows here, but maybe knock on some doors. And that has real impact because there's a human side to that. And no one else is doing that. No one.
In this market where there are so many rejections, either explicit or implicit, I think that's scary. Because if I'm just firing my GPT howitzer at every single job posting on LinkedIn, I can kind of insulate myself. And I don't really care anymore. I've detached myself from the outcome. You have to face the rejection. How do you overcome that? What advice would you give people to, because I think you're touching on gold here, that if you want to stand out, you've got to zig when everybody else is zagging.
Well, I think facing your fears in general is life, recruiting. If I could push you a little bit in this specific time of your life when you are seeking a job to do what is uncomfortable, I think that may or may not work on time 1 or time 2 or time 6, but the confidence you will gain from time 7, knowing that you're doing what no one else is willing to do, that will show. That will absolutely show.
So pick 1 or 2 people a week to reach out to. Connect in a human way. Ask questions, be curious, be visible, be connected. That's not hustle. That's a terrain change. Because when everybody is shouting into the same automated void, it's the quiet human signal that stands out. And there's another trap here, especially for engineers. The moment an interaction needs to result in a job, people feel it. Defenses go up, conversations collapse. Curiosity does the opposite. When you approach someone because you're genuinely interested in how they think, what they're building, why they made certain decisions, you're no longer asking for something. You're giving something, and you're learning. And people remember how you made them feel.
If you are curious as a human, that's one of the things that I think has helped me in the recruiting world is I'm not looking at you as a transaction, nor am I looking at the job as a transaction. I'm trying to learn about the fit, right? And so that is because I'm innately curious, and that can be taught. And so when I'm able to engage in a conversation, a dialogue about you, and you're able to share a piece of your life with me because I was innately curious and I cared about who you are and why you are the way you are and how that has affected you in your life, I will be remembered.
Don't even build relationships with a transactional mindset. Build relationships for curiosity, for human connection, just for fun. And you never know where those are going to lead.
In a world of high tech, high touch stands out. And if you catch yourself steering the conversation towards an outcome, that's your cue to stop talking and ask a genuine question instead. I want to share one quick story, not because it's special, but because it surprised me. See, Will called me a few months ago about a role. The company had interviewed a lot of candidates, strong ones. They were using modern tools, the whole thing. And in all of that, they never found me. Will did. Because we talked years earlier, because he remembered me, because he picked up the phone.
There's some irony in this, right? That we could add AI and we could add applicants, but and it's somewhat sad, right? I knew you from 7 years ago. I picked up the phone and called you and said, hey, I think this job might be one you'd want to consider.
I did literally write the book on that job.
That might help. But isn't it interesting, right? They couldn't find, in all of AI, they couldn't find you. And I did because I knew, that's a theme, right? Of the way I approach the world and the way I approach recruiting. I'm going to bias toward the human side over and over and over again.
And here's the part that matters most. I turned the job down. Not because the offer wasn't good. It was actually the largest offer I've ever received in 25 years. But because it did what it was supposed to do. It gave me clarity. See, that's the difference between chasing outcomes and having agency in a broken system. Every job ends. You either quit or get laid off or retire or eventually something else. But you continue. This market is not a referendum on your value or the value of developers. It's a system under stress. And systems under stress make for bad judgments. Don't let a temporary season rewrite your story or end it. Winter doesn't define the tree. Take some time to write down who you were before this job search started, the work that you were proud of, the problems that you like solving. And don't let a broken market rewrite that list. To wrap up, there's no hacks at this point. I don't think anybody really has any. Instead, I wanted to give you something harder to find right now. Clarity about what isn't your fault and how to move through this without losing yourself. Now, if you want to go deeper, the full uncut interview is posted free to the public on our Patreon. Link is in the description. Wherever you are and whatever you're going through, I'm in your corner along with a lot of other people. Truly, we are. And even if we're meeting for the first time right here, I wrote this episode for you. So if this episode resonated, there are a couple others that you might want to watch next. One explores the balance between machines and humans, how silicon and soul could work together instead of against each other. Another one looks at how systems break and what we keep forgetting when they do. And one more about rekindling your joy and reclaiming your brain in a world that often seems joyless and pushes us to burnout. Links will be in the outro. But one last thing. If there's a theme running through this entire episode, it's that human connection still matters, especially now.
I think that's always been valuable. I've always been a fan of the in-person element, the human element. I love live conferences. This is why I speak at so many. Because there's something magical when you just put a lot of smart people in the same place at the same time.
One of the few places left in our industry where real conversations still happen in person without filters or algorithms in the middle, it's no fluff, just stuff. NFJS conferences are completely built around practitioners, not sponsors. The people who do the actual work, sharing ideas face to face. If you're craving signal instead of noise and rooms where humans still recognize each other as human, it's worth a look. I'll be there, and I'd love to meet you in person. If you're in the middle of this right now, you're not broken. You're not invisible. And you're not alone. Take care of yourself, protect your identity, and hang in there. I'm rooting for you. We're all rooting for you.
I need something human.
I'll see you next time.
Let's face all our fears. Come out of the shade. Let's burn all the money, absorb all the lies, and wake up unscathed.
If I could say something to all the people and all the developers. Now, it's not going to work if you cackle in the background. I'm trying to get a good take for you.
The quiet, human signal that stands out.
I need something